Welcome to another episode of Passive Purpose, where we discuss ideas and ways that we can walk with God with practical application and really reach our potential in areas of our faith, our family, running a business, and even in the workplace. So we got another topic this week that I'm really excited about. I'd like to open this up with a quote, but before I do, let's open with prayer and we'll jump right into it.
Let's do it.
Jesus, thank you for the chance to be here. Thank you for an opportunity to honor you, to learn more about you, to surrender ourselves and be challenged in ways that make us look more like you, to show your love, your character, and your integrity in everything we do day in and day out in our lives. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
So a quote that really gets us going today in our topic that really challenges me goes like this. We live in a world where there is more and more information and less meaning. This one hit me big because the internet has changed everything. You know, it's already a struggle for just me personally, but even just for mankind across the board, to not get in a situation where we compare, we feel inadequate, we feel less than. And the age of information, as far as being a husband, a dad, running a business, making money, what your house looks like, what you drive, is getting harder and harder to not let that impact you in a way where you feel like you're missing out on things in life that other people are getting to enjoy.
What makes me laugh about it is my parents had a whole deck of the encyclopedias or whatever, the alphabetical bookshelves of all the encyclopedias. And I remember they held on to them because in their minds they were saying, okay, our kids are going to need stuff to research, papers growing up. They're going to need all this to look back on. And then, because I grew up right in the middle, technology is all I've ever known. Yeah. The internet's all I've ever known. So when I got to high school and I was writing those papers and using the internet, they were like, well, why do we have all these, you know what I mean? We have all these books, use these. And I was like, but I could just do this, So
yeah,
I don't know. I think it's hard hearing. It's weird hearing that it's such a problem for people, because for me, it's been such a blessing, actually.
Yes.
Just having all that information readily accessible. I mean, as we'll get into it later, but obviously finding wrong information is detrimental too. So you got to learn how to trust your sources, or what sources to trust. But yeah, I think it's I don't know, man. I asked this question, or I asked this question a couple of times recently, but would you rather live in the 60s? We're watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and we were talking about, would you rather live in the 60s, 70s era or this time? And I think I'd rather live in this time, just because information, if what we're doing right now, if we need to look up a quote real quick, we got it right now. You know what I mean? We can fact check ourselves instantly.
Yeah.
So.
See, I differ there. I would like to live in those times knowing what I know now.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would like to live in those times being much simpler, much less distractions, knowing what it feels like to have these resources available to you.
Okay, I get that.
You know what I mean? Because in that situation, everything we have has made things easier, more convenient, more efficient. And I will say, I do see so much potential and appreciate so many aspects of the technology. But when people lack the discipline to use them appropriately, they become more of a distraction than they become a tool.
Now you're just calling me out.
No, the reason you're here is because you're using them as a tool.
Right.
I mean, you were just showing me, you've taught me so many things, even using AI to help in your business on how you streamline and automate things to help achieve goals for customers, and even help you create free time for your own family at home. And that's huge. So using them as tools is different. And whatever you put in somebody's hand, it is up to them how they use it. So I'm with you 100%. Using these things to help us accomplish our goals and what we have set up for ourselves and what we're pursuing in our life, it's a huge tool, and it is way better than having to use a shovel as opposed to having an excavator. So those are mechanical tools.
Right.
And one does accomplish something at a much quicker pace. But it's just like when we have the internet and we watch other people accomplish these great things, but we don't do any things ourselves. We are paying a price for doing that, and that price is enjoying the dopamine hit that we get watching somebody else do something fulfilling and strive for their purpose in life. But we are missing out and being distracted from what God's calling us to do in our own life.
All right. So our first question to go over is, how has the explosion of information changed the way we view success, purpose, and even ourselves?
Two of the biggest areas that I see this impact on us is having dreams, but they end up dying out due to inaction. Through the amount of people's lives, the quantity of people's daily lives and making money, buying mansions, living on a yacht, all of those things, it is so easily to spend minimal or even zero time asking the question of how can I make this pursuit, taking a risk, facing my fears, a part of my life. Now, is the ultimate goal having a yacht and buying a mansion? If that's a goal of yours, great, but as long as we keep those in perspective of what the true goal is, that's fine. You can have those things and it not be a problem. You know, the Bible talks about the root of all evil is the love of money. Money is not the root of evil, but the love of it is. And when we put that as an idol in our lives, that's where it becomes a problem. But saying, God, hey, you've created these gifts and talents in me. How can I use them to pursue certain things? And whatever reward I get out of that, great. If it's a lot, I can use that for the kingdom. If it's a little, God, you still provided for me, and I get to use that for the kingdom. My first ministry is my family, and Lord, I want to use my time, my effort, my talents to provide a roof for them to live under, to give them food on the table, to provide clothes for them to wear, and be present enough that I actually get to impact them, mentor them, and lead them in a way that shows them how to honor God every day in their lives. But one of the biggest pieces is that distraction, I believe, when we don't use it to challenge ourselves.
Where that really hits in my world is, especially in the last few years with the rise of technology, it's like there's always a new gadget or there's a new, there's always a new camera out. There's always a better camera out. There's always, so it does feel like fighting the battle of feeling like I'm always constantly falling behind.
Yeah, and with us being tech geeks, we both have been in that situation.
Yeah, like the new drones, the new gimbals, the new
iPads.
There's a new one every year.
Yeah.
So it's that I've had to fight that feeling of the fear of missing out for sure, because it's like, oh well, I mean, you go on a shoot with another photographer and they got a slightly better camera than you already feel like it, because you already know what's being put out there. You already know what the new cameras that are coming out. I mean, the camera that we're shooting on right now, like that's a 7-year-old camera. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it feels outdated. It feels like you buy something and then the next day it's outdated, you know?
Yeah.
That's maybe that's a reach for the information, but I tie that in just because with the increase in information, the better our technology has gotten, the better.
And I mean, that's one of the things too that I think the challenge is for us talking about this. With the amount of technology, with a 7-year-old camera, you've done a good job of saying, hey, how can I use the access to that technology to learn facts and information on how to create top-level content with older equipment?
Right.
You know what I mean? And there are people, tutorials, and it's allowed us, if you control your thought pattern, take those thoughts captive, and look for opportunity in those situations, you can figure out how to find a solution to your problem without feeling the need to buy all this equipment and have to keep up with what everybody else is doing.
and that's always that's kind of why I think this topic is interesting, because I see it. I definitely see other people struggle with it. I mean, you talk about like with AI, everybody is terrified of AI. When I'm over here, I spent 6 hours on it yesterday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's my buddy. It's my personal assistant, like we were talking about. Like it's so awesome to be, and it's not that like I write everything off of ChatGPT. ChatGPT is the tool that usually just helps me get the snowball going, or it just writes out all the little things that I could write out. I know I could write it out myself, but I got in 6 hours, probably 40 hours worth of work done. The internet was actually one thing I think I had more freedom in growing up, just because my parents knew very little about it, so they didn't know how to monitor it. You know what I mean?
100%.
Which is a scary thing to say for parents. So not trying to like cause fear or anything, but I mean, obviously, like I got myself in some like bad areas on the internet. The internet's just, but the internet, I think, is also just a reflection of humanity. Like I think, obviously, you hear stuff about like people doing really dark things on the internet, but people do dark things in real life around you every single day.
Right.
I've never had the belief that you should be fearful of it. I think this is just a part of everyday life. Like we use the internet every day.
So would you say that basically our habits and what we do on a consistent basis at our foundational level is going to determine how we approach that tool?
Yeah, 1,000,000%.
Yeah.
1,000,000%. And like I definitely do get sucked in, and I will doom scroll for hours. Like I do struggle with discipline on that occasionally. But what the internet definitely has done, and what all this information has done, for me at least, was in those moments when I was really lost and I was really trying to just figure life out, trying to figure myself out, there was some reassurance in being able to listen to a podcast and somebody bring up, like at the time, I remember somebody brought up, there's a guest on a podcast who was big on stoicism. And this was around the time that my emotions were just way out of whack. Mm-hmm. And so me being able to say, okay, what is stoicism? Do some Google research, watch more podcasts on it, had to have that information right there. And I could just go down a rabbit hole for 2 hours and then find this philosophy that actually really helped me contain and understand my emotions. I think that's a blessing. And again, I think I just had that growing up with it. I just looked at it as just a part of life, and I just grew to accept it really early.
And being exposed to that gave you access to a new idea, a new possibility.
Yes.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, you think about even in Jesus' time, past the age of 13, if you weren't smart enough, couldn't memorize the Torah, you didn't get to continue your education and follow a rabbi and continue to learn. The education was very limited. And we all have access to that at our fingertips. But once again, it's the approach. What is your perspective? What are your priorities? What do you consider to be most important? And I think that's where it hits me a lot too, about having more information and less meaning, is a lot of times they don't show you through that process of following influencers, seeing people run, 6 and 7 figure businesses, is they don't put in the videos and the content, the struggles, the sleepless nights, all of the difficult decisions they had to make to get there. And the meaning comes from facing, or at least for me, in my personal experience and what we've talked about, when I faced those scary situations, the most difficult moments, and I figured out a solution, and even at times using technology to find that solution and overcome that difficulty, that is where the meaning has originated from for me, because I faced something on my own and at times with people around me, including yourself, and I overcame that and proved to myself of what I was capable of. I no longer was watching this person say, hey, this is where we started and this is where I came from, and say, man, that person did something special. I began to internalize it of saying, hey, I faced this dark moment of consistent doubt, overwhelming emotions, feeling like I was just about to break down into a million pieces, and was able to find what truly mattered to me, focus on it, trust in the Lord, and say, what do I need to do to face this situation in my life and overcome it? And when you get past those things and actually walk through it and don't just watch somebody else do it, that is where you go from a situation to having only information and no meaning to having a very good reputation of meaning for yourself. And when you pair that with the information, that's when things get really interesting.
Well, it's like, have you ever like taken a picture out at some big national park, some gorgeous national park, and then you come back with the pictures and you're showing your family, you're like, oh, the pictures don't do it justice.
100%.
It's the same thing with people that talk about, I went through this hardship. The video, the words don't do it justice.
Yep.
Because when we talk about it, we can attach ourselves to like those feelings that we've had or that we are having going through it. But what I'm feeling about it is not what you're feeling about it. Mm-hmm. We have to go through that in our own way. And I think it's good, but it's very daunting whenever you hear somebody talk about, oh, well, this is what I had to give up. And it's like, okay, so I had to give up my 20s, socializing with friends, partying, whatever. That's easy to say. But then when it came time for me to do it, it was like, oh my gosh, do I really actually want to do this? Because this doesn't look like fun.
Yeah. If you think the price of sacrificing those things now is steep, wait till you get the bill of regret later.
That's the biggest.
For not doing it now.
Yes. So like, I feel like I grew up with this accessibility to all this knowledge and information. Do you feel like you did, or do you feel like you kind of got a glimpse of both sides of the coin?
I got a little more of a glimpse than you did, just our age gap a little bit. So in high school for my papers, I was still using physical encyclopedias and stuff like that. Google was around, Wikipedia was, primary source. But between having older teachers, and even though that was somewhat introductory to be able to use, they were still pushing having access to the library, taking us to the library for class and using physical books. So I got to see a little more of both sides of the coin. And even through high school, the first smartphone wasn't released till I was almost graduating high school.
Right.
And so having that in the palm of your hand with a smartphone, as we do now, as opposed to not having a flip phone until I was 16, I didn't have direct access to any of those things on a consistent basis. So I did get to see a little bit different side of that, and when it was introduced to me in my life, for sure. Yeah.
So then how do you think having all this access to all this information sometimes leaves people feeling more lost instead of empowered?
From what I've seen, and even what I've seen in my own life, it's very easy to get on and watch other people doing things you dream about and get stuck there. Because you get to see all the cool things, the end product, the dreamy things, but it's one thing to watch that and then say, okay, I'm going to take a break from this and now go confront all of the things I need to, the insecurities, the doubts, the fears, and face that pain that I have to pay the price for, and now starting my own journey to do so. There is a transition period, because it's one thing to talk about it and a completely different thing to be about it. So you can completely watch one thing and then be challenged to go start your own journey, or you can, of course, just like we do, keep watching those people that, like you said earlier, show us that it's possible for us to achieve these things while you're doing your own journey. But I've been stuck in that fear spot before, where I felt like God had given me certain abilities and talents and passions, and was stuck in that paralyzed place of not jumping out to use them because of, simple questions like, what are other people going to think? What if I'm not successful? What if what I do doesn't look like what they are? Is that the only way it's going to be successful? Is that the only way it's going to be impactful? I mean, even starting this podcast, we both have had thoughts for years. I've had, I think, more than you had, just being older, of being able to take what we do on a weekly basis, meeting together, challenging one another, walking through the process of mentorship and discipleship, and taking that to an online platform to be able to join other people into our community and along for our journey. But this was yet another jump. We were already doing this. Mm-hmm. We're just throwing a camera out here for you guys to join in on our conversations. But we were already doing this, but it was yet another jump to say, hey, I see all this information out there, and taking it from what we're doing to adding that extra element was a challenge for us.
Yeah.
Confronting that fear of, well, what if what we have been doing isn't received by other people?
Right.
And we had to get to the point to where, even if it's not, fine, it is impactful for us. We are facing things that challenge us, that keep us awake at night, that make us scared. We are trying to unbecome things that have limited us from finding our purpose in life.
Yeah. You see what all's possible, which is great. But then, I mean, we now have access to look at any industry, any niche job, any whatever, and say, how do I run a flower shop for funeral businesses? And it's like, there's somebody out there that's done that. So now you can, so like for me, where I feel like I at least got stuck was having all of these options, and it's, where do I start now?
Mm-hmm. It's overwhelming.
It's so overwhelming. When we talked about doing the podcast, it was even that. It was like, okay, well, what podcast are we, like, not basing it off of, but like, what podcast do we get inspired by? You know, like, what do they do that we don't? And like, I feel like we got stuck in that for a little bit, because it was like, okay, well, I like the way this podcast does this, and I like the way this podcast does that. I like this intro. I like that. You know what I mean? There's so much that it is easy to get overwhelmed by it.
100%. It can be information overload. And that's where we both got to the point where we almost looked at each other and said, we just have to just start.
Right.
We have to dive in. Because you talked about, being able to find out how to run a flower shop. Okay, there's a ton of information. But when you get to the point where you've walked through all of those pieces, and let's say you actually get into action and try to utilize those tools. Okay, there's even how to, secure funding. But there is no explanation, and there's no way of putting this off on somebody else, putting it on AI, when you're actually at the bank about to pull the trigger for a commercial loan, and you're going to be on the hook for that amount of money, and it depends on your success of whether you'll be able to pay that back or not. Handling that feeling, facing that risk, that comes down to you and the work you're putting in. That's one of the biggest pieces, right? How do you face that fear? Do you believe enough? Have you put in enough work? Are you convicted enough about your purpose in life that you'll say, yeah, I'll be on the hook for $500,000 to fund my dream with somebody else's money, and I believe I'll do whatever it takes to pay that back. That's a whole different feeling.
And I think that it's important too. So like, if that's the question, so it's like, okay, well now because there's also information for that too. You just got to start. Like, you just got to start. You will find that information. Like, whenever I talk about like going into, I call it like monk mode, but like whenever I, wasn't going out with friends, whenever I didn't have a lot of friends actually for a lot of my adulthood, I was surrounding myself with podcasts, and I liked podcasts because they were having those deep conversations I liked, long format. But in a way, like, this might sound like weird, but in a way, there for a moment of time, when I looked at my circle, I actually looked at these podcasts like they were my circle.
Yeah.
So it was like, I couldn't relate to the feeling quite yet of the struggle of that feeling that every business owner has where they have the sleepless nights of like, what the heck am I doing?
Yeah.
But if I didn't have the 3 or 4 podcasts that I had on rotation where they all talked about, no, we all face this, I don't know if I would have kept going through, just because I felt like I had these people that I was listening to every week also talking about like, no, this is normal. This feeling is normal. You just got to push through it. Could I relate to the feeling? Not in that moment. But whenever I finally did get to those moments, I would remember what Jocko said. I would remember what Cameron Haynes said. I would remember what even comedy podcasts, man, like relearning how to just laugh was so big for me.
Well, and the risk they face of trying to pursue that career, and when they're not popular yet, how hard it is to make money doing that. Yeah, it's big.
Some of the best motivational stories I've heard have been from comedians, how they've had $3 in their bank account and then they
lived in a car.
They lived in a car and they bombed a show but now you look at them and they have Netflix specials, you know what I mean? So like that's so it was always reassuring for me. Just hearing those little nuggets of wisdom, the little nuggets of human nature that they all went through in pursuit of their dreams. Does that make sense?
100%. And that's where it comes into the discipline about what information you're pursuing.
100%.
You first saw that it's possible to do the things that line up with who you believe God created you to be and the talents that you want to share with the world. Then you pursued a deeper challenge of people that were now sharing, kind of like what we're sharing with our group, how to navigate and have practical application and how to handle those scary moments yourself. Like you can see all the cool, fancy Netflix specials of where they ended up. But now, if I'm really wanting to attack that and take a bet on myself, pursue the purpose of my life, how can I handle the emotions? How can I be disciplined in my thought life to where I'm pursuing the right things that even if I take a chance and it fails, I can remember that, hey, at the end of the day, God is my sole provision.
Yeah.
You know, money is a tool to help provide these things, but ultimately it's all provided through Him. And when we have that foundation built properly, when things are good and when things are bad, it doesn't ultimately matter with a kingdom mindset because He has us taken care of, whether we have a little or we have a lot.
Knowing what information you're taking in is so important too. Mm-hmm. Because that's the coincidence of opposites. Like with as much good as there is that I'm talking about, there is also that much bad. Mm-hmm. And I think on this pursuit, especially whenever I was in that phase of just absorbing everything, I definitely came across conspiracy theories. Those are fun. But,
right? We all have dove in a few of those.
But digging, for me at least, digging so far deep into like conspiracy theories or even just like, I don't know if sacrilegious is the right word. Different perspectives and different ideas on our origins, like how humans came to be. I followed this guy for a while, and it wasn't that I ever necessarily believed him. It was just like, oh, like you're saying, like you've done all this research and it seems true. Like I'm talking about like Dead Sea Scroll stuff, Emerald tablets, like all these crazy things. And I was just listening to this guy, and he was like, no, like I've seen him, I've worked with people, I've translated them, this is what they said. And it's like, okay, well, that's interesting. In hindsight, when I look back on that time frame, whenever I was like looking into that stuff, I actually, I know deep down that wasn't truth, just because of the darkness, like I felt the deeper I got into this thing.
Yeah.
And what I really think in hindsight now, looking back at that was me straying further from the truth, because there was that guy actually did a debate with a Christian historian theologian.
Yeah, Wes Huff.
Yeah, dude. And
yeah,
that debate with Wes Huff and Billy Carson, again, it was a beautiful moment in internet history for me, because it was like, oh, that feeling was validated because Wes Huff just came and rocked this guy's world with facts and knowledge and
Yeah. If you get a chance, check that out.
oh
yeah.
it's the most graceful way of saying, hey, you actually have no clue what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Hour and a half video worth the watch. No, it's definitely important to see where you, and again, like opportunities. I got stuck in the opportunity of like, okay, what if there's more to God than what just the Bible is saying? What if there's more? And it did lead to a lot of weird conspiracy theories type things. But I also feel like looking at that now, because growing up, like if I was looking into that stuff, that would have been heretical, which maybe it is. But challenging my faith through all that strengthened my relationship with the Lord so much more, because I really feel like giving myself the freedom to explore that and discover for myself that was not the truth.
Yeah.
Only made me look back to God and say, okay, yeah, for sure. Like I now know
Yeah.
that I can challenge my faith, and it just made me feel a lot more connected and in the long run.
Yeah, because now it's personal to you and not something somebody gave you and told you, hey, you're supposed to do this and that with information. Don't question it. Don't ask any questions. This is what you're supposed to do.
Right.
God wants it to be personal, and he wants it to be challenging, I believe. You know, Paul talks about the mystery of the gospel, and Jesus would share parables, and he would say, those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, will have the deeper understanding. And one of the most beautiful moments for me in making sure I'm challenging my own truths to make sure they line up with God's is the disciples came and asked Jesus, like, wait, what do you mean by this weird parable? And that if we have eyes to see, we'll see, and ears to hear, we'll hear. And he said, basically, to sum it up, it's for this moment right here. If you really care, even after I give you something that seems vague or maybe it's hard to understand, you'll still seek me out and come find the true meaning of what I'm trying to tell you. But those that don't care, that are just here for me to feed them and for me to do a flashy show for them, they'll leave, and I'll be left with those that are actually interested in pursuing me.
Yeah.
If he wanted everybody to understand the deepest of stuff, he would just literally put it out on a scroll or parchment or in a book and say, hey, this is it. This is all the deepest, most intricate details and truths of the world. And those that read it, great, whatever it is. We still have to put in effort to pursue that. But he goes a step further, it seems, to almost cloak it in these parables that seem confusing, but he wants us to show that deep level of commitment of saying, hey, I don't get this just yet, but I'm going to keep walking with you and serving you and doing my best to look more like you and less like me until I understand this truth in my life.
Right.
It's pretty crazy.
Even with the Bible, having the opportunity to have different perspectives or different sermons, even just the fact that I can pull up a sermon from any church in the United States and just hear a different message about the same story.
I mean, just thousands of them. Yeah.
Thousands. What really answered so many of my questions was actually Jordan Peterson's biblical series. Because for me, like, it was always like reading the Bible stories, growing up in the church, even working for the church and preaching these Bible stories. I always felt this disconnect of like, okay, but it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't.
Yeah.
I can go preach about how good God is, but I don't feel it. Like there's some practical elements I'm missing, because it's like I could, for whatever reason, like I could sit here and pray and say, God, I accept you as my Lord and Savior. Jesus, I accept you as my Lord and Savior. But it didn't feel like, I don't know, like it just felt like there was some disconnect. But then having all of Jordan Peterson's knowledge of psychology and what the practical side of these Bible stories look like in everyday life really gave me this new foundation to look at the Bible.
He's got some really good insights, yeah.
Yeah, just having somebody with that knowledge that I could find on the internet, with the knowledge of how the humans' psyches work, tied into biblical principles and how you can use biblical principles to improve your psyche and to improve the way you function as a human being. Mm-hmm. Like, that was so... I didn't know the Bible was capable of that. Like, it talks about, like, the Bible is a living word, and I never really understood that actually until hearing other perspectives and hearing, no, there's a common trope in this story. Everybody is capable of having their own Abraham story, their own Moses story. Everybody is capable of that. And I think just having the resources available to access that at any time that I want, again, like that's just been a big blessing for me. And I think, feeling lost is normal for a while, because for me, I was pursuing truth. What is the truth? What is the truth about God? What is the truth about, is there really a deep state? Is there really is the government controlling everything? There's that was my ultimate quest in my 20s, was what is the truth? And that branched off into every aspect of my life. And just being able to have all the resources. Yes, it was overwhelming. Yes, I got lost in it. But ultimately what that did was all the things that were wrong or that weren't the truth, it just challenged my faith even more.
Yeah.
And through all this research and through all the hours and hours of podcasts I've listened to, through all this, I know for me, for certain, I can confidently say God is real. Mm. And 100%. That came from being in that lost place, discovering the truth, and applying these nuggets of wisdom into my life from influencers I have grown to trust.
Yeah, but you had to put in the work. You had to go on the adventure.
Correct.
You didn't just sit and take somebody's word for it.
Right.
And the reason you wanted certain truth in your 20s is because things about the government impacted your world here.
Right.
But the reason it got deeper and went in a different direction about your faith is because your priorities changed to a kingdom mindset, and you wanted the truth of how these things impacted you eternally.
100%.
And starting that journey and realizing, hey, these truths about the government, deep state, and all that stuff, whether we find that out or not, it still wasn't feeding that ultimate void in your life and saying, well, there's still more. And that's where led you to the journey. It was beautiful. Led you to the journey of finding the truth about who God is and where we came from. What is our purpose individually, and being able to place yourself in those Bible stories.
Yes.
And that's the piece that we have to make sure. We talk about practical application here, is you have to know the word enough that when you hear 10 different sermons on a certain topic, you can say, hey, I've read that. I've wrestled with that. I've felt the Holy Spirit tell me this about the word. I felt like the discernment has shown me this about this piece. These sermons line up from what I've seen and what I feel like Jesus showed himself, and I feel like these haven't. But it's because your personal relationship with the Bible. That's the thing about it being risky. If we put in the work with the information and have access to these tools, okay, if we depend on others and follow their journey only, we can be at their disposal on what truths they give us. But if we find the truth for ourselves directly from the source, through the word of what God says, of what Jesus did on his time on earth, then we can begin to have discernment about all of the information out there, just like you shared through your own personal story. That discernment came as you journeyed through there. And that's when the tools like this become useful and not lead to that feeling of, hopelessness or being lost, but you've paid the price of finding out what the truth is.
Well, I think that's what's so important too. I'm going to say this as a arrogant person who's not a parent yet, but I feel like that's something that at least I feel like I missed out on. Was growing up, it was, no, this is the right way and that's the only way. This is the right way. But my curious mind, I have a heart for curiosity, so I was always asking, well, why? Why can't I do that? Why can't I hang out with that person? Why can't I do this? Why? So what that led me to do into my teenage years was do those things because I wanted to just figure out why. And I think it's the same for knowledge. You know, if you're only just living in, challenge me on this, if you're only living in, okay, this is all I know and this is just what I stick to, and you're not ever stress testing those ideas or challenging those ideas, unless you're just 100% locked in with God, like, I don't know how much stronger a relationship can ever become if you're never, like Wes Huff even talks about, like how he grew up with a Quran and the Torah right next to the Bible on their coffee stand, and his parents were missionaries.
Yeah.
His parents literally encouraged him to look into other religions because they were so confident in their faith in Jesus.
Yeah. No, you bring up a good point, and I think that is true. And from a parenting perspective, you know, it would have been beneficial for you to be able to see, given the reasons why you don't go the other way, because then you say, hey, I am going to stay here because I was told if I go over there, what would happen. And just like with business stuff, we can try different things, stress test ideas, but where it gets risky is when we begin stress testing things that lead to sin. And God does a good job as a loving father explaining why we should follow him and why we shouldn't. And I'll give you a funny story about, you know, I'm trying to do that for my kids. I tell them, hey, when I give you an answer or I tell you to do something, if you don't understand, I want you to ask me why. And they've done a good job, especially when it comes down to emotional, spiritual, you know, life, character decisions. You know, I want them to understand why I'm telling them to do that, so they're not just like, man, my dad's making me do this. And I think that's where you're coming from, because as humans, we're curious, and it's like, well, if I'm told no, I can't have something, typically we're like, well, I want to have that thing, unless we know why. Well,
I'm just going to do it harder now.
Right? Yeah, I'm going all in. Well, my son's really good at asking why. So is my daughter. But my son asks why on everything. So he's a snacker. And the other day we were at my daughter's basketball game, and he asked if he could have a soda. And I said no. And he said, why? And I said, son, if it's about something, if I tell you no on something and it has something to do with creating a habit in you, a character issue, a faith issue, I will explain why. But when I tell you no for a soda, and I've already told you why we limit those because of the sugar content, and it's a snack, I don't have to explain why. Mm-hmm. And that's a really good example, but I'm still answering that why and setting that precedence of, okay, it's a soda. It's not like he may want one. He's always going to want a soda, you know, and he's going to have to fight that when he gets older, just like we do. Do we diet? Do we not? Do we just get old and fluffy? Like, right. You know, and he can do that later on. But right now, I'm responsible for that. But it really helped me open my eyes, too, of saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to answer why and I'll walk you through that. But there's some things in life that we just don't need to mess with, of saying, why. It's a simple question. It's sugar. It's not healthy for you. And that's it. You've been taught that. And once you know that, now it's up to you to have the discipline to say, you know what? I've already been explained why. So there's no reason to keep beating a dead horse.
The higher your level of trust, the less need for details.
100%.
Yeah, that's big. That's really big.
But yeah, you're right. That's a scenario where we do need to challenge those things and go through. But God does give us the why. And if we start there, it could keep us from stress testing things that do conceive sin in our lives and lead to death. So this brings us to a final question. And man, it's a really good one. I want to kick this over to you. This says, in a world drowning in noise, how can we personally choose to find and create meaning?
To help set that stage, drowning in knowledge. So today with the internet, cloud storage, and scientific publishing, over 90% of the world's data has been created in just the last 2 to 3 years. In 1975, there were about 500,000 research papers published globally. Today, estimates show over 2.5 million papers are published per year.
Dude, over 90% in the last 2 years.
That's crazy.
So that impacts both of us. That impacts everybody listening right now. It's not even whether you grew up with technology or you spent, predominantly your younger years with it. That amount of information is, I'm struggling to even process that right now. Yeah. That's mind-boggling. You think about all of human history before us, the amount of information we have access to. Once again, it's all about how you approach it. It can be a huge advantage, or it could overwhelm you to the point to where it can keep you stuck, frozen, and paralyzed.
So with all this information, it's very easy. So like through our journeys, it's really easy to say find keywords like imposter syndrome, or it's easy to diagnose yourself with something because everything is so everything on TikTok is all about spectacle. It's all about the new trendy. Oh, here's the new psychoanalysis of men in our demographic, and all men are narcissists. You know what I mean? There's narcissism. It's so easy to diagnose yourself with something, or it's so easy to catch yourself in. But if it's not making you better, if it's not improving your livelihood, if it's not improving the circle of influence that you have,
yeah,
that's when I would say, okay, maybe that's not beneficial. Maybe that's not aligned with your purpose.
Yeah.
If we just talked about it before we started rolling, but looking at my childhood as learning to accept that I'm not a victim of my childhood. It's just the way it happened. Mm-hmm. I can look at moments in growing up and say, oh, I was abused then, or I was this. But I'm not using that knowledge of everything else telling me, okay, the way you grew up was crazy and not how it should have been. I could very easily pull up a TikTok video and say, oh, you have this disorder now, you have this. I could very easily do that. I could very easily believe that. But what does that really do for it? That doesn't improve anything for me. What I can do is say, okay, with the knowledge that I can look back at my childhood and say that was not normal, that's not what that should have been, I choose to look at that knowledge and say, okay, so I'm going to push for what I'm going to find good leaders. I'm going to find good influencers. I'm going to associate I have to make sure I'm consuming knowledge that is going to benefit my family in the future, that's going to benefit my business in the future.
Yeah.
And so I think,
apply it, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I think just making sure I'm discerning that is how I keep myself from drowning in all of that. Like I said earlier, I dove down all those rabbit holes. I went down conspiracy theories. Did we land on the moon? Who shot Dave?
Yeah, let's look at that one started. Yeah.
You can look up how coffee is beneficial and how coffee causes cancer, and you'll find an answer for both.
100%. So I don't even know if the Earth is actually round.
It is.
I believe.
Ask Katy Perry.
I agree, but it made me doubt quite a bit seeing all that stuff.
It's a lot. Is it benefiting you? Is it improving your life? Is it making you a better person? Is it improving the lives of those around you? The knowledge that you're getting.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, it's not worth it.
Yeah, because it's what are you doing about it? Especially as we get into adulthood, and if we pay attention enough, we care enough about how we're growing as an individual. As I'm talking to you, if I say something that upsets you and offends you, or maybe pushes a nerve, that causes some insecurity, whatever it is, I can usually read that, just being aware enough through past experiences to say, hey, man, I just said something that I could tell made him uncomfortable. And if I care enough, I will stop and face that awkward conversation to help us work through that. But if I don't, I will let you suffer in that. I won't help us resolve that, and I'll keep doing that same habit to other people, saying whatever I want, doing whatever I want, and not holding myself accountable. So like you're saying is, yes, that information's out there and there's a lot. And if something strikes a chord with you, your responsibility now is to say, hey, okay, I've now identified something that I was most likely even unaware of. You know, especially talking about the foundations of our identity. What am I going to do about it now? I'm confronted with this. So forget even pursuing a business and doing all those and facing those things. When you're facing the insecurities and the struggles of what you went through as a child or at an early age that you've let become a habit and a part of your identity for so many years, man, that's a whole nother scary giant to face. And there are amazing resources out there that can help you, but you have to use them and pursue them in a way that improves you as a person, that holds you accountable, that you hold yourself accountable. And one of the ways that in the drowning noise that helps me find meaning, and when we're talking about those things, I really look at where I want to end up in life. And it's just like putting directions in a GPS on your phone through Google Maps. If you put in a destination, you're going to get all of the right turns, left turns. Hey, go straight for 10 miles. Hey, you're going to be on this highway for 150 miles before you make your next turn. But if you follow those directions, you apply yourself, you'll end up in the destination you want to be. So many people, we have all the noise going on. They do not think and ponder about where they want to end up at. And so they start just taking random turns.
You also have to have the humility to be wrong and to accept that, hey, maybe I'm wrong about this.
That one's tough for anybody. But humility is just another muscle. The more you work it out, the better you become at it. And if you can practice being humble and being able to admit those things, talk about them, you know, even in a marriage with your kids, talking about those things with my children that are embarrassing of what I went through, to make the mistakes necessary to say, hey, this is why you don't do this, and I'll tell you why, and I'll give you a personal experience. It's not easy to tell your kids, I made this bonehead move, and this is why I know this is a bad choice. Right. Bringing up things with your spouse and confronting those feelings of sharing how you struggle with certain emotions or you struggle with something in your past that makes you feel unworthy. Even with somebody you love so dearly can be so hard because you're like, well, what if they don't even accept me when I share this? And when you begin to hold those things in, it makes it very difficult to work through them. Being able to be humble enough to say, hey, I'm not perfect and I am struggling with this. Can you walk alongside me through this? But if you can practice that, and you're blessed enough to have people around you that say, hey, I hear you, I'm not judging you for that, and I appreciate you just being honest with me. That's when you can get in and begin to unbecome those things so that you can let them go, surrender them, and focus your thought pattern on something new and become a different version of yourself that's way healthier for everyone around you.
And I think, so if you're watching podcasts or you're watching intellectuals or people that just talk about ideas or concepts or whatever, something for me a practical thing to do too is, do they debate people with opposing views? Because if they're just on their channel and they're just, just talking about whatever, but they don't challenge, those ideas are never challenged, because what the challenge shows is how much they actually know. Like as that Wes Huff, Billy Carson interview, perfect example of someone that was just saying this fantastic story to make money versus somebody that was actually invested in the truth. Seeing just how Billy Carson operated in that debate and just folded because he was just unprepared and all of his stuff just wasn't backed by anything real.
Fell apart. Yeah.
If you do watch podcasts, if you do take knowledge or resources from the internet, I would also look for those episodes or videos where they are challenging those ideas.
100%. Because if the truth that you are listening to be presented, or even if you're believing, can't stand up to the toughest questions, you have to ask yourself, is it even really true?
Yeah.
And I went through a phase of my own life where I was doubting, or scared. I should say scared. I believed the Bible to be true. I was doing youth ministry, and for whatever reason, I had this overwhelming fear of, man, I'm up on stage teaching young kids every week that this is the ultimate truth. And what if I have not challenged myself enough to find out that there was something else out there and I'm misleading people? And my first instinct was, no, just kind of bury that under the rug and not face that. A lot easier. But for my own personal journey, I knew, no, I have to know if it's really true, it'll face any criticism, any test, and it will hold up. And I went on my own apologetics journey, deep dive. And just like you shared earlier about once you go on that journey yourself, how it strengthened your faith, it was one of the most pivotal pieces of my life to not only strengthen my faith in the Word, grow in the knowledge of my Word, but strengthen my relationship with Jesus, because seeing the principles of the Bible, the truth of the Bible, withstand such difficult questions, ideas, philosophy, and information out there was so reassuring that it made my conviction even deeper in my faith. But yet questioning what you believe is not taught enough, I don't believe. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
And being able to question those things and challenge those ideas and thoughts in our lives is crucial. Now, when it comes down to respecting authority, you know, when we talk about kids and all those different things, it's one thing. But asking questions respectfully, asking and challenging thoughts respectfully is 100% within those means. And that's why I try to push my kids to ask why. I mean, they're not doing it to disobey. Now, if they ask why and I tell them why and they do something different, that's disobedience. And when we do that to the Lord, that's the same thing. We're saying we're still choosing our own direction. But when we have that information and we challenge it, God already knows we're thinking those thoughts. So why would we hide them from Him anyways? You know, going on that journey, just like the disciples did after everybody left from being fed and seeing all the miracles. Jesus, can you tell us why you said those things? And when He did, it drew them even closer in their conviction of following Him as their rabbi.
Learning that inquiring was encouraged was really big, because what I did was I confused inquiring with doubt. I thought it was, if God was leading me into a direction, I thought it was wrong. I thought I just had to sit down, shut up, be along for the ride. But because I was so afraid of like doubting it, but in my walk, it has led to a lot deeper connection of me just saying, okay, God, I'm sure this is where we're going. I just, like, what do I need to look for?
Yeah.
What do I need to do? How can I prepare? I'm no longer worried about what's at the end of the road, because I know where that is. I'm no longer worried that I'm not going to be provided for. I know I am. Sometimes I do just need to know like what to look for. I just need 100%. To make sure like I'm on the right track. And I think definitely inquiring is okay.
Yeah, and too many times we treat God like a demanding boss of just shut up and do what you're told. He does expect us to do what He tells us to do, but He is a loving Father who says, hey, hang out with me, sit around the fire. I'm going to tell you some stories. I'm going to give you principles and habits to put in your life. And ultimately, this is where I'm asking you to go. But here's why. This is what it'll produce in your life. These are the amazing things you'll get to experience. The peace that transcends all understanding. You'll have the fruit of the Holy Spirit in your life, and you'll be able to use those to impact other people. And He wants that to be a part of our relationship with Him and the intimacy of that relationship, of being able to laugh, cry, question, be angry, wonder what's going on. But when we treat Him like a domineering or demanding boss and don't get that closeness and intimacy, it really does impact the motive behind what we're doing in our lives.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing also to like add to all this is, so like with 90% of all knowledge being added in the last 2 to 3 years, what I've found is that the majority of that knowledge also just kind of just ties back to biblical principle. Like
Yeah.
every quote that I have on my notes list, I can, if I look hard enough, I can find it's tied directly to a biblical principle. So I think what I'm really trying to get at is, it may sound different, it may look different, but another thing that you can do to challenge any new knowledge or ideas that you believe is if you can find it in a biblical principle, it might be worth keeping around. It might be worth keeping that quote around or that statistic handy. When I read the statistic about that 90% of data has been given to us in the last 2 to 3 years, that's overwhelming, but it's also encouraging, because I'm also able to look at that and really challenge every idea that I see people. It's the mob mentality. Like with all this new knowledge, with all these new lectures, with all these new ideas and sermons and whatever, I'm able to challenge these ideas. I've always been pretty contrarian, seeing what everybody else was doing. But now that I can look at all this new knowledge and say, okay, I see this is what everybody else is doing. Why are they doing that? And I can definitely find some knowledge about why everybody's pursuing this and why I maybe shouldn't.
100%. Yeah, if you look at the average at anything in life, when a lot of people are doing something, that usually should raise a red flag for you if you're looking at what's really true in your life. You know, the older I get, I've realized that if I have a lot of just general friends, that means I'm probably being a version of myself to a handful of those, that I'm not consistently being my genuine self.
When you think you should have loads and loads of friends.
Right. You know, because what you see online, you know, the big group hanging out, just laughing all the time and just doing the things that make you feel good. I've learned the closest friends I have in my life, they challenge me. They push me to be uncomfortable. They tell me things when I'm feeling certain emotions and I'm trying to make decisions. And they say, you know, have you thought of this? And make sure you are doing X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, but I don't really want to do that. They hold me accountable to that. And those good friends are trying to find the purpose in life, and they're going to do the same for me. And the average of people are looking at all this information and just consuming it. And that's where it becomes overwhelming. A small percentage of people that have access to this and are actually pursuing meaning is a small percentage of the humans we have that have access to it. And so when you look at a situation in your life and there are more people doing something than not, you need to ask yourself why. Because it is a lot easier just to consume it and watch it and enjoy somebody else's, you know, exciting success and adventure than to confront than it is to confront your own things in life and face what you need to go on your own adventure. And so with these questions, with the practical application we're trying to do, we are pushing ourselves and pushing everybody that's listening to do the things necessary to get out of your comfort zone and to use the information to actually produce certain fruit in your life and not just be somebody that consumes it. You see things out there that are amazing that can impact your life, but you never do anything with them.
Even like right before starting doing this, I told you, like, that's where I was at, was like I felt like I'd spent a couple years just absorbing all this knowledge, and now it's like, okay, what do I do with this? I can regurgitate all this stuff, but now what do I do with it?
And that's part of it. That's a growth process of being able to be trained. Just like getting a new job, you got to go through a training process before you can get started.
100%.
But make sure you start looking for that opportunity to now become a functioning employee in the kingdom of heaven, of saying, hey, I've been trained up. I've pushed myself to let go of things that have been holding me back. I've pushed myself to seek out truth that was confronting to what I thought, is how life worked. And now I'm ready to go out and not only live this for myself, live the genuine version of who God created me to be, but I'm going to help others do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really important.
And it really starts too, if you don't do it for anybody else, make sure you're the version of yourself that helps your spouse and your kids. That's your first ministry, to be able to do those things as they go throughout their daily life as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be on a podcast like we're doing, or with a camera rolling. It doesn't have to be thousands of people. It doesn't have to be in a church where you have a congregation coming every week. But to first focus on yourself and impact the people closest to you on a daily basis, that is you impacting the world around you every day by hearing this truth and applying it to your life to make those practical applications to help you change the world around you.
Yeah. And knowledge and understanding are two very different things. It's so easy to get knowledge. It's very difficult to get understanding.
Yep. And you can only talk to somebody and talk about ideas at their level of understanding. Mm-hmm. And it is very difficult when you are pushing in and pursuing these things. And that's where patience comes in, of trying to share these principles with people that have yet to even confront these things in their life. And it can be very challenging. But regardless of who else understands them, I want to make sure I'm doing my piece to honor the Lord, to where I'm seeking that understanding, because ultimately I'm accountable to Him and Him alone. I can lose everything and everyone in my life, but I can never lose the Lord. And as long as I keep that perspective, it'll keep me focused on taking these truths and applying them to my life.
Yeah.
So, man, great quote starting off. We had 3 big questions that we worked through today. Really challenged me to keep pushing in on how I can take what God's given me, the one opportunity I have at life, and the moment He's given me in human history, to live an epic and adventurous life in a way that honors Him and helps me understand who I was created to be, so that I can live in that peace. So another good episode today. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next episode. Peace out.
It's a wrap.